My family moved behind my back, said I was too dependent. I arrived unannounced, with my will, my lawyer, and a smile. They moved and didn't tell me. That's the kind of truth you say once, then sit quietly with your hands in your lap, waiting to feel like a person again. I came back from the bakery. It was Tuesday, always Tuesday, because that's when the sourdough is warm, and the key didn't work. Not jammed. Changed. The brass glinted like it had never known me. I stood on that porch, bag of bread cooling against my hip, and tried again. Nothing. The curtains were gone. The pots with my herbs, too. The wind chime, that silly one with shells I brought from Cape May in '92, wasn't there. I knocked once, then again, louder. No answer. A young man from across the street came over. "They moved," he said, like it was weather. "Big truck came Sunday. Thought you were going with." I wasn't. They moved. They took my slippers from the hallway, the photo of Richard on the mantel, and didn't take me. I sat on the top step of a house that used to be mine and watched someone else's dog walk past like it was just another Tuesday. It took me 3 hours to reach my neighbour Marcia. Her phone was off. When she opened the door, she gasped. "What happened to your face?" she asked. I didn't know something had happened to my face. I suppose it must have looked like something had been taken, something under the skin. I stayed that night on her pullout, didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling fan, counting the seconds between clicks. Marcia offered tea, but I didn't want comfort. I wanted explanation. The next day, I called my son, straight to voicemail. I called again and again. On the 5th try, he picked up. His voice was dry. "Mum, I thought we talked about this." "Talked about what?" "You being too dependent. It wasn't working. It was getting hard." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't ask him who cooked for his kids when they had the flu, who paid his electric bill the winter he was laid off, who taught his wife how to make cornbread without burning it. I said, "You moved without telling me." There was a pause. "We didn't know how to tell you." I hung up. My hand shook, but not from anger, from something colder, something final. The next call I made was to a number I hadn't dialed in 10 years, but I remembered it by heart. I remembered a lot of things they forgot I knew. The number still worked. Same dusty ring, same soft click on the 3rd tone. "Margaret?" The voice hadn't changed. Deeper, maybe. Slower. "Hello, Thomas," I said. "I need to know something." 10 minutes later, I was sitting on his porch, fingers curled around a chipped mug of chamomile. He still used the same mismatched cups. His wife had passed 5 years ago, he told me. Cancer. I nodded. We didn't talk about grief, just business. He brought out the papers I signed in 2004, right after Richard's 2nd heart attack. My husband was a planner. "In case something happens," he'd said. I hadn't argued. Some women get jewelry. I got estate documents. Thomas laid them on the table like playing cards. "You remember this?" he asked, tapping one with a thick finger. It was my signature, steady, sharp. Below it, the line. "In the event of Richard's death, Margaret Louise Ellis retains 50% ownership of all real property, regardless of future occupancy." I remembered signing it in a raincoat on the hood of his car. "I still own half," I said quietly. "You do." "And they know that?" They never asked. I looked at the edge of the page where the seal had faded slightly. 50%. Of everything. The old house, the accounts, the new house, if purchased with joint funds. And it had been. I remembered the cashier's check, my name on the memo line. Thomas watched me, cautious. "What do you want to do?" "I want my chair," I said. The blue one, with the rip in the arm. I want the tea kettle, the garden spade with Richard's initials, and I want them to look me in the face when I arrive. He poured more tea. And I want them to know, I added, I'm not coming as a guest. I'm coming as an owner. We spent 2 hours drafting a letter. Not emotional, just facts. My legal stake. My decision to take temporary residence. My right to access. We kept it firm, not cruel. We don't burn, I said. We knock. Thomas folded it into a crisp envelope. You'll need to bring this with you. I'm not mailing it, I said. I'll deliver it myself. I slept at Marcia's again that night. She offered her spare key. I thanked her. The next morning, I ironed my best blouse, light blue. Richard used to say it made me look like springtime with opinions. I packed a small bag, just enough. The letter, the deed copy, my will, signed, notarized, witnessed by 2 neighbours who now both used walkers but still knew the weight of my name. I called a cab, gave the new address. Visiting family? The driver asked. Not exactly, I said, watching the streets pass like years. We turned onto a wide, clean street, lined with cars too quiet and hedges too manicured. Their house stood at the end, tall, modern, smug. I stepped out, smoothed my skirt, and walked up the drive. I rang the bell. Then I smiled. The door opened slower than I expected. Not like surprise, more like delay. Like someone trying to think if the past is standing on their porch. John blinked. He looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe it was the haircut. Maybe it was the guilt. Mum? Hello, John. He didn't move. His mouth opened, then shut, then opened again. I didn't know you were coming. I know, I said. That was the problem. Behind him, I saw stairs that weren't mine. A lamp I didn't recognize. A couch too white for people who still had children. None of it felt like home. But the mortgage was partly paid with money from the account I used to fund Richard's rehab. I knew the balance. I had the receipts. May I come in? He stepped aside slowly. Yes, of course. It's just, Christina's not, she didn't know. I'm not here for Christina, I said. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and something artificial, like comfort bought in a bottle. I set my bag down in the entryway, quietly, like I wasn't shaking, like I wasn't hearing Richard's voice in my head saying, "Don't let them shame you for surviving." Is that? John pointed to the envelope in my hand. It is. He didn't reach for it. He stared at it like it had teeth. Christina came down the stairs in heels too high for a house with toddlers. She wore a silk blouse and that strained smile I'd seen too many times, the one that says, "I'm in control, even when nothing's in your hands." "You're here," she said. "I am." "Why?" "I wanted to see the new house. This isn't a good time." "It wasn't a good time to change the locks," I replied. Her face flushed. "You don't live there anymore." "I didn't move out. I was removed." She looked at John. He looked at his shoes. I handed her the envelope. "What's this?" "My reintroduction," I said. "As a 50% owner of all joint assets, including the property you stand in. As of the date on that document, I am not a guest. I am not a visitor. I am a resident with rights." Christina tore the flap and scanned the top page. Her face changed. Slowly. Like paint cracking in sun. "You're bluffing." "You're welcome to call your own lawyer, or Thomas Brenner. He helped draft the original." "Why are you doing this?" she asked, suddenly brittle. "Because I didn't disappear," I said. "You just stopped looking." I turned to John. "Is there a spare room?" He nodded, barely. "Then I'll take it." "Just like that?" Christina snapped. "Not just like that," I said calmly. with full documentation and legal standing. That's not just like. That's how. No one spoke for a while. I picked up my bag and walked past them, heart thudding like a bass drum under silk. The guest room was small. Not a guest room, really. More like a home office with a fold-out couch and a single drawer. But the walls were clean, the air quiet, and it had a window. I sat down slowly, opened the clasp on my bag, and placed the letter on the nightstand like a flag. Then I took off my coat, folded it neatly, and waited. No one said goodnight. I unpacked in silence. One sweater, a comb, my tea tin, still half full with peppermint leaves I'd dried myself. The drawer stuck slightly. I didn't force it. Some things weren't built to hold much. I boiled water in their sleek chrome kettle. Christina passed through the kitchen without a word. Her heels clicked across tile like punctuation. John lingered in the hallway. "You blindsided us," he said quietly. "I arrived with a bag," I replied. "You left me without a key." He ran a hand through his thinning hair. "It wasn't personal." I smiled faintly. "It always is, John. When you erase someone without telling them, it's not strategy. It's cowardice." He didn't argue. I sipped my tea slowly, mint and quiet. I used to make him mint tea when he had nightmares, rubbed his back and whispered, "You're safe, you're safe." Funny how people forget the hands that kept them whole. That night, I slept lightly. The couch was stiff. The room smelled of printer ink and lavender detergent, but I'd rested worse places, hospitals, motel lobbies, even Richard's armchair, the night after his second stroke, when I was too afraid to close my eyes. In the morning, the house was still. Christina had left early, a brunch perhaps, or a calculated absence. John sat at the table with his laptop, half-eaten toast at his elbow. He didn't look up. I made eggs. For myself. Didn't offer. Didn't ask. At 10 o'clock, I took the envelope and left. Thomas's office hadn't changed. Still smelled like paper and pipe tobacco. He wore the same sweater, navy, elbows shiny with wear. "She didn't scream?" he asked. "No." "Then she's planning something." "I hope so," I said. "I'd hate to think she gave up that quickly." He chuckled. "You've still got teeth, Margaret." "I just don't bite unless provoked." He reviewed the documents again, carefully. They used joint funds for the new property. You can make a legal claim. "I don't want the house," I said. "I want clarity." "Then we do it cleanly. You'll file a formal notice of partial claim. That gives them two options: buy out your share or negotiate residence terms." "What if they refuse?" "Then we go public. Press, court filings, exposure." I stirred my tea. No one likes a mother with claws. They shouldn't have raised one. We drafted the notice, straightforward, assertive, no vengeance, just mathematics and memory. Thomas folded it carefully, added a cover letter, and handed me the packet. "Shall I courier it?" "No," I said. "I'll put it on their pillow." He didn't smile, but I saw his approval in the set of his jaw. Back at the house, Christina was in the garden, pruning, aggressively. I passed her without a word. In the guest room, I laid the envelope on the pillow. Scented, weighty. That evening, they didn't eat in the kitchen. I heard plates upstairs, a closed door. I made soup. I ate in silence. When I washed the bowl, I smiled. They had taught me how invisible I could become. Now I was showing them what that invisibility could do. 2 days passed. Not a word. Christina avoided eye contact like it cost her something. John left early and came home late. I heard their whispers through drywall not built for tension. Phrases like, "She can't be serious," and "We have to find a way around it." But they said nothing to me. which was fine. Silence had become a language I spoke better than any of them. On the third morning, a letter arrived. Hand-delivered. No stamp, no signature, just a typed page left on my makeshift desk in the guest room. Margaret, we've reviewed your position. We believe this is a misunderstanding. We'd prefer to settle this amicably. Please consider other living arrangements. We're willing to assist financially. This isn't personal. It's logistical. I read it twice, then once more, aloud, slowly, like reciting something dead, not personal. I folded the letter neatly and placed it under my saucer. When John came home, I was in the kitchen, shelling peas. He paused, looked at me, then looked away. Did you get our note? I did. And? You may keep your finances, I said calmly. I'll keep my signature. He flinched. Later that day, I walked down to the notary's office. I'd called ahead, made sure they were open. The receptionist offered me a pen. I brought my own. The document was clean. A formal notice of retained ownership. No threat, just fact. It carried weight, not in tone, but in timing. When I returned, Christina was at the dining table with a glass of wine, wearing reading glasses and the look of someone who had always controlled the guest list, and just found herself uninvited. I know what you're doing, she said. I set the notary-stamped envelope on the counter. Then there's nothing left to explain. This house was supposed to be ours. Then you should have asked permission before moving in. We didn't think you'd want involvement. You didn't think I'd still matter. She stood up, quick. You're making this ugly. No, I said. I'm making it accurate. That night, John knocked on my door. He didn't come in. We didn't mean to hurt you, he said through the wood. You didn't mean to include me either. Silence. Mom, what happens now? Now, I said, you decide how many headlines you want this to make. He didn't reply. The next morning, I was already dressed when the realtor arrived. Jessica Tran, early 30s, professional, kind eyes. She greeted me like a person, not a problem. We sat on the porch. I handed her copies of the documents. She read quietly, lips pressed together. You're not selling, she said. No. But you are negotiating from position. Yes. She nodded. Then let's make it clear what you're owed. We discussed options, shared equity, conditional buyout, a structured timeline with penalties. I don't want to gut them, I said. Just remind them I built the bones. Jessica smiled gently. Sometimes reminding is more powerful than revenge. We drafted the terms that afternoon. I read every line aloud, not because I didn't trust her, because I wanted to hear my own name, spelled correctly, next to words like entitlement and retained interest. When we were done, she printed the papers in triplicate and placed them in a pale blue folder. You want me to deliver it? She asked. No, I said. I stood, straightened my blouse. This time I'll knock first. They were having dinner. John, Christina, the boys. Something with rice. I smelled soy sauce and tension before I even opened the door to the dining room. I stood in the threshold holding the pale blue folder. No raised voice, no accusation, just presence. Something they'd once asked me to erase. Christina glanced up, fork halfway to her mouth. Can it wait? No, I said. It really can't. John shifted in his seat, cleared his throat. The younger boy, David, watched me. He always had eyes like Richard's. Quiet, serious, not easily fooled. I walked to the table, set the folder down in front of the salt shaker. These are the revised terms of residence, I said. They outline 3 options. I didn't sit. I'd spent enough time in that house feeling small. Option 1. You buy out my share at current market value, cash or certified transfer. 30-day window. Christina blinked. Her lips parted, but I held up a finger. Option 2. I remain in this house, rent-free, with full access and shared decision-making on major changes. Shared, she began, but I continued. Option 3. I liquidate my share and initiate proceedings to block sale or refinance. That includes freezing joint assets until the matter is resolved in court. The rice steamed quietly. David put down his spoon. Christina's voice cracked. You'd take us to court? I'd take myself seriously, I said. John leaned forward, elbows on the table. What do you want, Mum? Really? To be acknowledged, I replied. To not be the last person you think about when you make decisions that erase my life. It's just a house, Christina said. No, I said. It's the years I scrubbed tile grout with my knees. It's Richard's handprints in the concrete near the back gate. It's every Christmas you forgot to thank me for setting the table. Those aren't legal claims. They're memory claims, and if I need to, I'll attach value to every single one. John covered his mouth with his hand. Not out of shame, out of calculation. That's what I saw in his eyes. Not regret. Risk. You'd really do this? I already did. The notarized copy was filed this morning. The younger boy whispered something to his brother. I caught only one word. Lawyer. Good. Let them remember I had one. Christina rose from the table, napkin clenched. You're tearing this family apart? No, I said. I'm reminding you it had a mother. They didn't follow me back to my room. I didn't slam the door. I didn't have to. Later that night, I heard them fighting in the kitchen. Something about bank statements, about how long I'd been planning this, as if protecting what's yours requires stealth, as if surviving their indifference was a scheme. I brewed tea. I placed my old notebook beside the cup, and I wrote one sentence. I used to make space for them. Now I make space for myself. The next morning, Christina didn't come downstairs. John sat at the kitchen island, stirring cereal long after it went soft. He didn't look at me when I entered, just pushed the bowl away and muttered, You win. This isn't a contest, I said, setting the kettle to boil. Feels like one. I opened the cupboard and reached for my mug, the only one with a faded sunflower print, the same one Richard gave me on our 25th anniversary. It used to sit in the middle shelf at our old house. Here, it had been shoved to the back, behind tumblers no one ever used. You could have just talked to us, John continued. I tried. You were too busy planning my disappearance? He flinched. You said I was too dependent, I said. But who paid the deposit on your first apartment? Who drove Christina to her mother's funeral when you were away for work? Who watched the boys when you had food poisoning? His silence didn't surprise me anymore. It had grown familiar, like a hallway with the lights off. What do you want, Mom? I already told you. Acknowledgement. And what does that look like? Today, it looks like my chair, the blue one, from storage. He blinked. That thing's torn. It's mine. 2 hours later, the chair was in the corner of my room, a little dusty, a little sun-faded. Perfect. I sat down slowly. The cushion sighed beneath me like it remembered. That afternoon, I opened my notebook again. August 2013, paid overdue tuition. Stolen $400. June 2016, covered transmission repair. Stolen $200. March 2019, babysat for 12 days straight when Christina had shingles. I wasn't writing it for revenge. I was writing to remember. Because memory, I've learned, is the one thing they can't seize when they change the locks. That evening, the boys knocked on my door. Both of them. David, holding a video game controller, asked if I wanted to try the racetrack. I almost said no. Then I looked at their faces, unclouded, unspoiled, curious, not cautious. "Yes," I said. "Let me just get my glasses." They cheered like I was a magician. For 20 minutes, I crashed every digital car into every digital wall. They laughed. I laughed too. Christina passed by once, her expression unreadable, but she didn't interrupt. Later, when I was back in my room, I thought about that, how her silence had shifted. It wasn't superiority anymore. It was uncertainty. They hadn't expected me to stay. They hadn't expected me to have terms. And they certainly hadn't expected me to still have a voice that didn't ask for permission to be heard. Before bed, I added one more line to my notebook. October 4th. Played Mario Kart badly. Felt seen anyway. They held a meeting, not a conversation, a meeting. Sunday morning. Formal voices. Coffee poured into mugs that matched, unlike their intentions. John sat at the head of the table like a man presenting quarterly losses. Christina beside him, arms crossed, spine straight. She'd applied lipstick for the occasion, the kind of red meant for war. "We've reviewed the documents," she began. I didn't blink. I folded my napkin in half, then again. Neat corners. "We'd like to propose a buyout," John said. "Fair market value." Quietly. No more surprises. I looked at them. Two people who thought grace came with conditions. "And where?" I asked. "Would I go?" Christina lifted her chin. "Wherever you want. I lived with you for 3 years. Cooked, cleaned, helped raise your sons. You moved without telling me, changed the locks, and now you want me to disappear." "We didn't handle it well," John admitted. "That's not the word," I said. "You handled me, like a situation." They said nothing. "I'm not an antique you forgot to appraise. I'm the foundation under your feet." They exchanged a look, nervous, defensive. "You can have the house," I said, "but it will cost more than money. I want 2 things." Christina's voice was tight. "Which are?" "1, the garden." "The garden?" "I want it transferred to my name, that strip of land behind the garage. I don't care about square footage. I care about what grew under my hands." John nodded slowly. "And the second?" "A public letter. From both of you, stating I was never a burden, that my presence was a gift you mishandled, that you learned something." Christina's laugh was sharp, brittle. "You want us to write a confession?" "I want you to tell the truth. For once." "That's humiliating." So was being left on a porch with cold bread and no key. Silence again. David peered in from the hallway, eyes wide. I caught his gaze and smiled gently. He disappeared without a word. Christina stood. "We'll consider it." "I suggest you do," I said, "because without those terms, the sale doesn't proceed, and the legal filings begin." They left the room together, not quite aligned. Their footsteps didn't match. I remained at the table, ran my fingers over the rim of my mug, then stood and walked out to the backyard. The small strip behind the garage where my mint had struggled, where the rosemary still fought to come back each spring. I knelt, knees creaking, and dug my fingers into the soil. Still mine, even before the paperwork. That evening, an email arrived, a draft of the letter, 2 signatures at the bottom. "We apologize to Margaret Ellis, whose generosity and resilience were never properly acknowledged. We mishandled her trust. We have learned, and we will do better." I read it once, then saved a copy, then printed 3. I framed one, placed it beside my chair. Not as a trophy, but as a receipt. The house got quieter after the letter. Not out of tension, something else. as if a knot had been loosened and everyone was afraid to tug the string again. Christina didn't slam drawers anymore. She still left early, but the footsteps softened. John hovered more, in the hallway near the kettle, pausing like he might ask something and then forgetting the question. One evening, I found a fresh bouquet in my room. Not store-bought, cut from the backyard, lilacs, mint, a bit of clumsy lavender. No note, but I knew the handwriting of care when I saw it. I didn't say anything. Some things are louder when left unspoken. That night, I couldn't sleep, not from noise, from clarity. I sat in the chair, the blue one, and watched the streetlight cast a shadow through the blinds. At midnight, I brewed tea and carried my cup to the kitchen. John was already there. He didn't look startled, just tired. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "Didn't want to." He poured himself water, waited. "I read the letter again today," he said. "Regretting it?" "No," he said quickly. "Just sitting with it." "Good," I said. "Some truths are like stones. They don't move unless you hold them for a while." He nodded. "I should have asked you first. About the move." "Yes." "I thought you'd say no." "I probably would have." He smiled, faint. "I didn't want to fight." "Then you shouldn't have made war by silence." We sat at the table, late-night light, two adults pretending they were still mother and son in the way that meant something. "Why didn't you yell?" he asked. "I was raised to believe that women who whisper last longer than those who shout." He didn't respond, but he understood. I opened my notebook and slid it toward him. "You want to know what hurt?" He scanned the list. Dates, small things. $42 for a prescription copay. 6 hours watching the boys on a Sunday when they had hand, foot, mouth. A line that simply read, "July. I wasn't told the baby walked." He swallowed. Hard. "I didn't mean to erase you." "But you did. And you can't undo it. You can only start keeping me in the frame again." He closed the book gently. "I don't know how to make up for it." "You start by asking what I want, not assuming." "What do you want, Mom?" I looked out the window, the garden barely visible. The soil where I buried parts of myself over years of small dismissals. "I want dignity, and I want to decide what I do with what's mine." He nodded. The next morning, I found another note on the kitchen counter. His handwriting, messier than when he was in high school. "I'll have the deed transfer drawn up today. The garden is yours. Thank you for staying." I didn't cry. Not when I read the note. Not when I saw the new deed, freshly printed, with my name alone on the title of that crooked strip of dirt behind the garage. Not when John said, "The lawyer can file it Monday." I just nodded and made toast. But that afternoon, while pruning the rosemary, the one Richard planted in 1996 with too much fertilizer and a grin like mischief, I found something under the soil. A box. Small. Metal. Rusted along the edges. I wiped the dirt with my sleeve. It was one of his, an old cigar tin he used for spare screws and coins. Inside, folded carefully, was a note. Yellowed, edges curled. His handwriting. "If you're reading this, it means you've outlasted the quiet." Good. I always knew you would. I sat on the garden stool and read it twice. 3 times. The rest of the note wasn't long. They'll forget. That's what the young do. Not out of cruelty, but haste. But you remember. That's why you'll win. Not with shouting, but with staying. With roots. The tree that doesn't move survives every storm. Love always. Ah. I didn't move for a long time. The breeze shifted. Somewhere behind me I heard David calling for his brother. Something about chalk on the sidewalk. Life continuing, like it always does. When I stood, I folded the letter, slid it into my notebook, and walked to the porch. John was trimming a hedge. His clippers paused when he saw me. "Found something," I said. He looked puzzled. "In the garden. From your father." He set the clippers down gently. "What did it say?" "That I'd outlast the quiet." John smiled, not sheepish, not guilty, just small. Like a boy hearing a bedtime story that ends differently than he remembered. "Mum," he said, voice lower, "do you ever regret staying with us all those years?" "No," I said. "I regret letting you forget I was there." We sat on the porch for a while. No more words. Just air and grass and the hush that comes when people stop pretending. Later that evening, I returned to my room. I stared at the framed letter beside my chair. Then, for the first time in weeks, I removed it. Not out of anger. Not to erase anything. Because I no longer needed proof. I kept the cigar tin, cleaned it, lined it with velvet from an old scarf. Not because it needed dressing up. Because I needed somewhere to keep reminders that didn't wrinkle in memory. Inside went Richard's letter. A photograph of us from 1978. I wore that hideous green blouse he loved, the one with the bow at the collar. My first driver's license, laminated and slightly faded, and the key to the old house, the one they changed without a word. I didn't keep it out of sentiment. I kept it to remember I still had hands strong enough to turn locks, even if others tried to replace them. One evening, Christina appeared in the doorway of the garden. I was on my knees, coaxing new basil through the soil. She stood there, arms folded, then unfolded, backlit by a sun she didn't know how to soften under. "I didn't know about the letter," she said. I didn't look up. "Which one?" "The one your husband left." I brushed dirt off my palms. He knew what silence could do. She stepped closer. "John said it changed you." "No," I said. It reminded me who I was. She crouched near the mint, her blouse too white for the task. She looked smaller there, not diminished, just real. "I was never trying to hurt you," she said. "I know. I just didn't know how to make space for someone who'd always filled every room." I looked at her then. Really looked. And for the first time, I didn't see the girl who took my son and rearranged him. I saw a woman who didn't know how to share, who had built her adulthood by declaring her own center, and forgot who kept the scaffolding steady while she rose. "I gave you too much," I said, and left myself with almost nothing. She nodded, not defensively, just truthfully. "I don't know how to fix it," she whispered. "You don't," I said, "but you can stop pretending there's nothing to fix." We planted the basil together, her manicure chipped halfway through. That night, I reread Richard's letter one last time. The tree that doesn't move survives every storm. I folded it again, slipped it back into the tin, and added something new, a letter of my own, just one page. "To whoever finds this soil has known hands that gave more than they were asked, and feet that stood longer than they should have. If you are here reading this, may you know what I learned too late. Stay where you are valued, but first, know how to value yourself, enough to leave, enough to speak, enough to come back when needed, but not quietly. This was once my garden. Now it's yours. But don't forget who watered it first. M.E. I sealed it, dated it, and placed it under the rosemary roots, because one day someone else would kneel there, and they deserved to know whose voice still whispered from the ground. It was David who asked the question that shifted everything. We were sitting on the porch, sun folding itself behind the hedges. He was sketching something in a notebook, a car, or maybe a spaceship. And I was knitting a scarf I'd probably never finish. Grandma, he said without looking up, what would you do if you had $1 million? I smiled. That depends. Am I 80 or 30? He grinned. 80. Then I wouldn't waste a second pretending I didn't know what it was worth. He thought about that. Would you keep it? He asked. Or give it away? I'd give it where it counted. But first, I'd make sure I wasn't giving to people who only saw me as a wallet with a voice they didn't like. He nodded slowly. You mean, like Mom and Dad? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He went back to his drawing. That night, I sat in my room with the lamp low and my notebook open. The garden was mine now. The money, half the house's equity, once the buyout finalized, would soon be transferred. I didn't want another apartment, another corner to fold myself into. I wanted use, purpose, not from them, from myself. The next morning, I called an old friend, Miriam. We hadn't spoken in a year, maybe 2, but I knew she still volunteered at the Women's Centre, a small building with peeling paint and a waiting list that never got shorter. Do you still have women coming in with nowhere to go? I asked. She sighed. Every week. Do you have room? No, we make room, but never enough. Would you take help from a stubborn woman who just got her spine back? She laughed. Only if she brings cookies. I visited the centre that same afternoon. The linoleum floors were scuffed, the windows stuck, but the walls were lined with coats and quiet bravery. Miriam gave me a tour, showed me the rooms, the names on the doors written in marker, the bedspreads in mismatched florals. One woman folded towels silently in the hallway, another rocked a baby in a chair that creaked like it remembered too much. This, I said quietly, is where money should go. Miriam looked at me. Why now? Because I've been invisible in a house full of people, and these women are invisible in a world full of options they never got to choose. I left a check with her that evening. Not $1 million, but enough. Can we name the new room after you? She asked. No, I said. Name it after every woman who stayed when she should have been honoured. Back at the house, no one asked where I'd been. I didn't offer. Christina was cooking dinner. Lentil soup, too much salt. John folded laundry. The boys argued over screen time. Life reassembled, but different. I walked into the garden, sat on the stool, dug my hands into the earth one more time, and whispered, You see, Richard, I'm not just surviving, I'm planting. The day the funds cleared, I didn't celebrate. I made a cup of tea, opened my notebook, wrote down one word, enough. Then I put the pen down and stared out the window. John came in with the paperwork folded into thirds. He laid it gently on the kitchen table like it might break. It's done, he said. I nodded. He waited. We can wire the rest of your share next week. You can keep it, I said. His brow creased. What? I donated most of it. His face tightened. To who? Women who don't have porches to sit on, or voices left to speak with. He sat down slowly. You didn't have to do that. I know. I thought you were going to… What? Find a little condo with bad lighting and fewer memories? He looked down. I just thought you'd… go. I did, I said. I went where I was needed. Christina passed by, holding folded sheets. She paused, hearing the tone. She didn't interrupt. You're not staying here forever, are you? John asked, quieter now. No, I said. I've stayed in enough places where I had to explain my worth. I won't keep doing that. He didn't argue. Not this time. I stood, picked up the folder, slid it across the table toward him. Keep it, I said, as proof I didn't take more than I gave. He opened it slowly, scanned the lines, then looked up. "You're serious? I'm free." That afternoon, I went back to the center, brought cookies, as promised. Chocolate chip, still warm. One of the women, maybe 30, maybe 50, it was hard to tell under the weight of her face, asked, "Are you a volunteer?" "No," I said. "I'm a reminder." A reminder of what? That staying silent too long costs more than most women can afford. She nodded, slow, as if translating that into a language her body still understood. I didn't preach. I watered plants, sorted blankets, sat with people who didn't flinch when kindness came without transaction. When I came back that evening, John was in the garden. He was pulling weeds. "Didn't think you'd notice," I said. "I didn't do it for you." "Good," I said. "Then maybe you're finally doing it right." He smiled, faint. "I want to be better." "Then stop waiting for applause." He paused. "Do you hate us?" "No," I said. "I just stopped loving you at a loss." He kept working, slower, more careful. I stepped inside, closed the door behind me. That night, I packed. Not much. 2 bags, my notebook, the cigar tin, a scarf, still unfinished, a letter I'd never send, and a small envelope with cash. For David. When he's old enough to understand what kind of silence not to inherit. I left before sunrise, not to sneak out. I'd had enough of leaving without dignity. I left when the light was soft, when the garden still smelled of night, and when no one could pretend they hadn't heard me close the door. I placed the envelope for David on the kitchen counter. Nothing dramatic, just his name, written in the same cursive I'd used when labeling school lunches and birthday cards. Inside was a note. "For when you want to build something with your own hands, let no one tell you what's too small to matter." Christina stood at the top of the stairs. She didn't speak, just watched. Maybe she thought I'd cry. Maybe she thought I wanted a goodbye. I didn't. John came out to the porch as I zipped my coat. "Where will you go?" "I already went." He swallowed. "Will you write?" "I already did." He nodded, not understanding. But that wasn't new. I stepped down the porch stairs, 1, 2, 3, and didn't look back. The taxi was waiting. The driver didn't ask questions, just smiled and helped with the bags. Kindness is often quietest when it's sincere. We drove past familiar corners, a bakery I no longer visited, a church I'd once wept in, alone in the back pew after Richard's funeral. The city didn't look different, but I did. The women's centre had offered me a room, small, bright, with a window that faced the sunrise. Not charity. Partnership. I'd help with intake, with comfort, with what no file or form could provide. I moved in that afternoon, hung the scarf on the back of the chair, placed the cigar tin in the drawer, watered the plant on the windowsill. Basil. Persistent. And then I sat, tea in hand, notebook on my lap. No one asked if I was okay. Because here, no one had to perform their pain to be seen. We were all just women who stayed too long in houses where our names were only remembered when things went wrong, and who finally chose our own walls. I wrote my last line. They moved without me. Now I move without them. And if this story found you, if you've ever been shut out, erased, or told your presence was too heavy, remember this. The door they closed wasn't the end. It was just your chance to build one that opens the right way. Like this story? Share it. Save it. Send it to someone who needs reminding. It's never too late to come back with your name, your worth, and your will intact.